All right, guys, I've got all of my walnut slabs into the shop. Now I'm gonna start to work on my layout. And I know that I want these all to be roughly 16 inches. The cool thing about charcuterie boards is kind of the more unique they are, the better in my opinion. So I'm not looking for anything to be exact, but I'm just gonna simply draw 16-inch reference lines on each of my slabs. And then from there, I just start to randomly draw out different shapes and sizes. Also, I should mention, I just picked up these Dixon lumber crayons from, I believe, Home Depot. I wish I would have gotten these a long time ago. They're perfect for writing on lumber. I had used markers in the past, but markers bleed into the actual wood grain and it takes a lot to sand them out. And then pencil is sometimes way too light to see on walnut. So I get black and yellow in these Dixon crayons. They're like 20 or 30 cents and they show up perfectly and they work really well. But here's my stack of walnut and I'm gonna start referencing 16-inch marks with this ruler here. And this is all I'm doing. I'm just simply drawing lines every 16 inches or so. And that's because I need to make at least 20 boards and I've got 8 slabs that are 4 feet right now. And if I do 3 per slab, that'll give me 24, which will be perfect. And I think 16 is just a really good size. It's like a medium to large size charcuterie board. And then from here, I'll start panning out the shape of the handle and so on. This first slab here is extra wide, so I'm strongly considering running a line down the center of it and getting 2 per each section, if that makes sense. You can see that center line, and then I just roughly drew out where the handles would be, and I just kind of keep alternating as I go. My whole goal with charcuterie boards, and when I'm using expensive lumber like walnut, is to utilize as much as possible. I don't want to waste material when cutting these out. So I'll probably make the next board right in between these 2 handles. That'll be kind of like the base of it. And then I'll just follow the contour of this handle down and over here and draw another handle. That way I'm not like cutting out a big section in between these handles that just goes to waste. And here's the finished layout of this board for me. I just kind of like to use the shape of the natural lumber. So you notice on this last one here, this is gonna be more of a squared off one, but the shape of the handle, I just kind of contour with the natural curve of this slab and just kind of work with the angles that you're given. And like I mentioned, there's no right or wrong way to do this. That's why it's fun. This middle one, I've got an angled handle on, just to kind of fill that space I was talking about that I didn't want to waste. So now my waste material is down to just a couple small chunks, and I'm maximizing my profits that way by wasting the least amount of material. I don't make a large margin on charcuterie boards to begin with, so utilizing every single inch of material that you have is important. Which shape of these 3 do you like the best? Do you like kind of this squared off one? That's my favorite of the 2. Do you like the curved handle, or do you like these more traditional ones over here?
Here you can see kind of my workflow. I set out those layout lines 16 inches across just as a reference. So all my boards are relatively close to the same size in this batch, and then I start drawing handles, and I just work with what the wood gives me here and alternate handles to maximize every inch of this lumber.
So here's another thing I wanted to mention. This is one of my favorite pieces of the few that I got here, but there's a void up here. And the thing about voids is you have the most beautiful grain around knots as a rule. And you can see some of this beautiful curl in here, but I also have a crack here. And this is a small enough crack where it wouldn't take much to finish it, but I'm gonna try and avoid this crack in my design. Because it takes me way more time and effort to fill this with epoxy, wait for it to cure, sand it all back down flush again, versus just going around this little section here. Plus you can see when this was plain, this is a low area and it's kind of rough still. So I'm gonna just avoid this today because I'm trying to do my best to stay as profitable as possible on these. So here's a different angle, but here's that crack that I was talking about. So I'm going to either integrate my handle coming in and under this crack and making it over here, or I'm going to go up and above this crack. Like I mentioned before, this area right here that is a little bit of a different color, this is all rough because this is kind of a natural dip in this board. And when it was plain, the knives didn't even touch this. So I'm going to try and just avoid this area altogether, which would give me really one option here. And that is to kind of come up and underneath this void, and then I'm going to come about through at about the same height here, and then make my handle right in the middle, just like that. All right, on to another one here, giving you a couple different situations here. This actually has a pretty large check going through it that stops about right here. So instead of filling this void or risking this check splitting a board down here, I'm going to just take and use this as my edge line. So I'm going to split this piece into two more narrow ones, and then I'm just going to come off of where that check kind of ends and then make my handle down here. And this is going to be a little bit more of a narrow charcuterie board, but people like all different shapes and sizes for this kind of stuff.
So normally I would use a bandsaw and it would make this a lot quicker and easier, but with one hand, the jigsaw was really my only option here. I started with a really stiff blade, which is not ideal for making curved cuts. So shortly after this video, I went to the hardware store and I found some thinner blades that are made by Spyder, and they do a lot better job of cutting curves nice and clean. But in the meantime, I was making this work with one hand. And it does work. A little bit of extra effort and the use of a couple clamps, and I was able to get it all done. Then I go over to the belt and disc sander and I round over every single corner, and then I do a little cleanup work on the handles as well. This is just a rough sand here. I'm not too picky about how it looks. I'm just trying to take off any sharp edges and just make the whole curvature of this board flow a little bit better than it does coming right out of the jigsaw. Then I head on over to this oscillating spindle sander, and this sander is really the only tool that works good at getting into these grooves by the handles. The only other option that I found that works good is just using a piece of sandpaper and a little bit of elbow grease, but this saves you a ton of time, and you get some of that end grain that is really rough smoothed out with these sanders. After that, I have this 1/4 inch round over bit in the router table, and I just smooth out the inside of that hole that I drilled out and the outer edge of the handles, and I finish everything again with my Festool ETS 125, which is a fantastic sander, and I've logged up probably close to 100 hours on this thing this year, and it just does a great job of getting rid of the bark on the sides, and then it also makes quick work of flattening out both edges. I start with 80 grit for this bark removal here, and then I do it 80 grit on the tops and bottoms because they are pretty darn rough coming from the mill. Then I go to 120, and then I finish with 220 on charcuterie boards, and I usually get pretty good results that way. After a rough sanding, I water pop it. I've been using a rag instead of a spray bottle. It's just a little quicker and easier on the forearms. And then after this dries, I fill everything with Starbond CA glue. I use this on almost every single project. It just comes in a 2-part system. You have the glue and then the activator. If you want to purchase some of this, I have a promo code BUILT, and that will give you a discount on your order. I highly recommend it. After my final sanding at 220 grit, I'll water pop these one last time and then sand again with 220 grit. And after that, they are going to be all set for finish. And for my finish, I use Howard's cutting board oil. I just recently started filling up a huge tote like this with it, and then I scrape the excess oil off back into the tote because I found out I'm just wasting way too much of this product, and I spend about $50 a gallon just on the oil. In the past, I had soaked these and then I would buff all of the oil off with like a paper towel, and I'd go through a bunch of paper towels, and basically all that excess oil would get absorbed into the paper towel, and I would just throw those away, and it was super wasteful. And the whole premise of this video is about how I can stay profitable or maximize my margins on these boards, and this is a great way to do that. Scraping off this excess oil allows you to salvage it and use it so much longer than I would have normally used it in the past. This 1 gallon I estimated will allow me to finish between 80 and 90 boards doing it this way. And in the past, it probably would have allowed me to finish 30 to 40. So I'm almost doubling the amount I can get done. After I soak them and scrape off the excess, I just hang them on these little drying racks I made, nothing to it.
So after I sell all these charcuterie boards, we wrap them in bubble wrap, and then I have this really heavy duty brown cardboard paper that we picked up from Home Depot, and it's used to cover floors when you paint or remodel your house. And we essentially wrap this up like a present in this cardboard paper, and then we put a bunch more tape on it and then print out our shipping labels. I don't want to show the information on that label, but this is what they look like when they're ready to ship out. And we've got quite a bit more to go here today.